Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce, as Ukraine War News Update, the second part thereof for the 2nd of March 2025. And there's quite a bit of geopolitical news to go through, obviously, because there was a massive meeting. Well, the meeting's just finished in London between European leaders Zelensky and Starmer. I say European as in EU, Zelensky and Starmer. And also lots of reactions still coming out to that and to everything else that's been happening from the US, all the usual geopolitical things going on in the background anyway. And Starmer is now, I think, as I'm recording this, making a speech about the meeting. So actually, it's probably a poor time to be recording this, but I don't have much choice. But there will be more coming out as the hours go by. So, you know, what I say is by no means the final word. In fact, it's just the opening words on what has taken place. Let's just go back a few days, though, and get a sense of this meeting that's taken place in London between these leaders in terms of what are some people bringing to the meeting. So Emmanuel Macron said the other day that Europe cannot be a vassal of the US. Macron says that amid Trump's foreign policy shifts. Speaking during his 2-day visit to Portugal just this week, French President Macron said that Europe must be, quote, more united and stronger than ever and take decisive steps in, quote, technological, industrial and defence matters. Exactly what we've been talking about for a number of weeks, especially given the US's positioning. And Macron has also said, but we must not forget one point, and this is directly against the American rhetoric over the last few days. If anyone is playing the Third World War, it is Vladimir Putin. So the White House interaction that came out, you know, you had Trump coming out with, hey, you're playing with World War III here. And Macron is just correcting Trump very openly. He said, if anyone's playing Third World War, it's Putin. He was the one who started the war 3 years ago, and he brought 10,000 North Korean soldiers to European soil. And I think actually that's been really forgotten. It's not in the rhetoric. It's not in the conversation at all. And it should be, right? The US is blaming Zelensky for everything at the moment. And it's got to the point where I'm so frustrated. And it's so unfair. It's deeply unfair. It plays on all my kind of fairness triggers. And it's infuriating that they don't recognise that A, Putin is the aggressor, B, that Putin started this war by invading Ukraine. I mean, it's just like living in an alternative reality. And then, you know, they're bringing North Koreans into a war zone in the geographical area of Europe. It's absolutely staggering. Okay, the EU leaders at a meeting next week. So this is this meeting, or this might be the one on the 6th. I don't know. EU leaders at a meeting next week will discuss the appointment of a special envoy. I don't know if that is today's one, representing the bloc in possible negotiations around ending Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Now, I think this needs to happen. I think there needs to be a Central European person. And I'm sure, you know, they realise that as well, who will act as, I guess, one of the negotiators if Europe is at the table. And of course, Europe will be at the table now, I'm pretty sure, because I think there's going to be separate negotiations going on. Potentially, it might be, right, Europe, maybe the UK, but Europe, Russia and Ukraine, and hopefully the United States as well. But the United States just seems to be hell-bent on lining its own pockets with any kind of negotiations that are taking place. Now, okay, going to sort of last night and the meeting going on today. So I want to say a few things on the UK and how they've handled things, because there's quite a lot of nuance here. And I'm not proud to be British. I didn't choose to be British. There's no merit in it. But I'm happy that the British have done what they've done in quite difficult situations. So let's give a bit of context here. The UK is in a financial, not black hole, but in a lot of trouble, right? And we need to release a load of money to help Ukraine and boost our own defence, armed forces and defence, of course. So that is challenging, and we really can't afford to dip into the budget. You know, we need to find money from somewhere else, maybe taxing foreign corporate entities that seem to be able to get by with paying less tax than me, like Amazon paying less tax than me. I'm sure something could happen about that. So there are these challenges for the UK to stand by their rhetoric, and then so that's one aspect. Another thing to consider is, in light of that, and in light of the fact that there is going to be a trade war with the EU, and UK is out of the EU, we've been able to, Starmer went over and smoothed things over with Trump. Trump quite likes Starmer. He likes Britishness. He's given the invitation to a state visit to meet the king and all that kind of stuff. And that was all well played by Starmer and his team. I mean, they did a good job, and I think they did as well as they could have done, although they didn't really come back with any concrete objectives. And what we really want are the Americans providing backstop to a security guarantee. Okay, that's really what Starmer's is needing, because he's talked about there being three aspects to any kind of peace deals going forward. One, Ukraine negotiating from a position of strength, which means arming them to the teeth and then allowing them to prevail on the battlefield to the point where they go to the negotiating table from a strong position. Two, European security guarantees. So there needs to be a deterrent to stop Russia attacking again if there is a peace deal. And three, because Europe can't do that all on their own, there are certain capabilities that the US has and capacities that actually we need the US to provide a backstop to that peace deal. Okay, so those three things need to happen. Interestingly, I guess what the Europeans and UK can do is say to the US, we've been helping you out with Israel and taking out Iranian missiles, and we can say this to Israel as well. So we're not going to do that anymore because we've now got to do everything in Ukraine because the US won't do anything. So US, you can do that all on your own, and Israel, maybe you should stop, doing all these deals at the moment with Russia that seem to be on the horizon. Go and see my earlier video today, my hits and losses video, where I talked a little bit about that. Maybe there's some leverage there with Europe. Say, look, we aren't going to be able to come to your support, US, when you are doing these things around the world, right? Because we can't, because you said we've got to look after Ukraine and you're not going to help. So we're not going to help you. And it's not out of spite. It's not like, tit for tat. It's literally, we don't have the capacity to do that. So sorry about that. And then that might get the US to go, okay, yeah, we will provide a backstop and then you can still help us out, etc., etc. But anyway, going back to this trade deal situation. So the UK is looking like they've done a trade deal with the US to get past or to evade receiving tariffs from the US in the same way the EU is receiving tariffs. We don't want a trade war with the US, but the problem is we want to show solidarity with Russia, and there's a bit of a tension going on there, and Starmer's got a difficult job to say, right, I'm going to be the central guy here in organising all this stuff. We want to really help Ukraine. But I can't massively criticise Trump too overtly, because if I do that, then he will walk back this kind of free trade deal and we will have to get involved in a trade war because he holds grudges like that, or he's quite thin-skinned or whatever. And that's the problem here. So there's a very difficult path for Starmer to negotiate with all of these entities, all of these plates that are spinning. And as a result, all of that builds into my point here, or this point. So the UK did a masterful job last night. Starmer and his team did a masterful job last night of receiving Zelensky as soon as possible from the US, when he was literally kicked out of the White House, gets on a plane, goes to the UK, meets Starmer, has a warm embrace, and in fact, Starmer walked out of number 10 and walked down the road for a warm embrace. It wasn't like the official kind of, I'm waiting here, you come to me. There was, and lots of people on the news have been talking about this. Isn't just me kind of coming up with rubbish. Like, there was symbolism in him doing something that doesn't normally happen. So it doesn't happen that the Prime Minister walks down the road to meet the leader that's visiting and hugs them down there. And it was a very warm hug. Then they went in, had this speech, had this talk together, which some people said was quite emotional. And there was a lot of genuine warmth there. And when he then left, Zelensky, Starmer accompanied him to the motorcade down the road. And again, that was symbolic. And all of this, and meeting the king today, and etc., and having crowds that were cheering for Zelensky when Zelensky turned up, to the point where Starmer supposedly said this, if you're lip reading, did you hear people cheering you on the street? You can see the support, and we will support as long as it takes. We want long-term peace. Right. What the UK did, and in fact, let's go and look at some of these other analyses. Paul Mason, Labour guy but really strong on defence, said the UK is one of the most restrained and subtle diplomatic forces in the world. No need for a degree in semiotics to see what it did tonight. So that was last night. And this is the idea that pictures speak louder than words. 1,000 words have been easily spilt in each of these pictures, which is to say that the US has just slagged you off. It's all on fire in the media over there. You've been rejected by the White House, but look how well you've been received in the UK, almost like a hero's welcome type thing. And the Prime Minister really means it. And the Prime Minister's just been out at the White House dealing with the US. But he can't say that. He was asked by Laura Kunsberg this morning, a political editor for the BBC, asked, or former political editor actually now, asked, what would you like to say to Trump? Because surely he's being inconsistent, because he said this and now he's said that, he's done this, done that. Like, surely, that doesn't fit with what you've just said about being able to trust him. And of course, that's trying to get Keir Starmer into a corner. And he diplomatically evaded answering the question, as you would expect. Like, you wouldn't expect him to answer that, because he'll get himself in hot water and it will mess things up. So, yes, we criticise politicians for not answering a question an awful lot. But at times like this, you wouldn't want them answering that question honestly, because the honest answer there would be, well, Trump's an absolute dingbat and we're actually pulling our hair out, and my goodness, we're having to pick up the pieces and it's all crazy. Like, if he actually said that, then that starts up a ruckus with the US. So you can't answer certain questions honestly. So you evade answering them at all, so you're not lying. And that's what he did, as you would expect. But the point is that he cannot come out against Trump rhetorically. So what does the UK do? It comes out against Trump symbolically and pictorially and visually. And that is what Paul Mason is talking to here. It's a subtle diplomacy that is communicating without words, to the point where Barely Politics says the most impressive thing about the British culture is the ability to say F you very much with such impeccable politeness that the recipient walks away thinking, what a charming person. That's exactly what Starmer just did to Trump today. Honestly, I'm almost looking forward to Trump's visit, because for those who know what to look for, the barely perceptible passive aggressiveness is going to be absolutely exquisite. That's really, really on point for me. And I am totally happy with the UK's response to what happened in the White House, because it's very clear to me what the UK really thinks. This is about reading between the lines, bit of inference to be done. Now, every detail, says Akash Maniam, has been carefully planned to ensure the world understands where the UK stands. This walk to the motorcade is a sharp rebuttal of disgraceful ways Zelensky was ejected from the White House. Again, this, they would have discussed this. I'm pretty certain they would have discussed this, which is like, how are you going to meet him? What are you going to do? Are you going to hug him, shake hands? This will be gamed out. And the walk to the motorcade, to very kindly, and Zelensky gave a warm wave like a couple of times. It was a nice moment, and waving him off in that way that you can see there is a total juxtaposition to the American White House experience. It honestly is. It's just, everything is about the symbolism here. And again, like, he's not going to get into trouble. The UK's not going to get into trouble because it's not a public statement, right? But those in the US that are paying attention here, and I'm not saying Trump will, but his aides will, are going to know exactly what this means. As Akash Maniam says, the UK stands with Ukraine and that won't change. Really important. Now, we get on to the meeting today. And one thing that was Sadly, missing, or more than one thing, because there's several of them, were the Baltic leaders. And I think this was a bit of faux pas, and we couldn't quite work out what happened. I wonder whether he had left it to aides or other people to work out who's going to come to the meeting, and the Baltics weren't invited. And that is, I think, a bit of a slight, because they are massively important. Yes, they're small countries, former US republics or whatever, part of the Soviet Union, not USSR, part of the Soviet Union, first-hand experience of, Russia as it is now, or as it was then, and incredibly supportive of Ukraine. So Tim White says, incidentally, talks are ongoing in London. Okay, so now they've finished. Before the main meeting, the UK Prime Minister apologised to the leaders of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania for not inviting them to today's summit. He said it wouldn't happen again. That is good. Bad that they weren't invited, good that he's recognised that. Gitanas Nausėda from Lithuania has said he's had an important discussion with the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, and other Baltic leaders. My takeaways. 1, we should not spare our effort to maintain a strong transatlantic bond, so we still need to keep plugging away at the US. 2, US and Ukraine should return to the negotiating table together with the Europeans. Yep, Europeans absolutely need to be part of this, and they need to muscle in on it. They need to just say to the US, no, we're not being sidelined. You are having, if you're going to be discussing Ukraine, we're there at the table, whether you like it or not. Or you can go away and Ukraine will be with us and Russia. NATO's eastern flank safety is a priority, right? So then that's talking about backstops for a peace deal, but also just making sure you don't pull out too much. We're hearing today that 20,000 troops are going to be pulled out from American bases in Europe as a result of kind of the fracas that's happened. And then lastly, European peace enforcement, a possible element of security guarantees for Ukraine. Okay, tea break there, very necessary. Let's move on. Okay, so this is what it looked like. That's a picture of the leaders together, all very official and flaggy and suity. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte speaking after the summit. Okay, what are his takeaways? More European countries will ramp up defence spending. In fact, we've already heard that from the UK today. Some interesting announcements. There is no peace deal yet. You wouldn't expect a peace deal. Like, they're not going to thrash out a peace deal there. They need to talk about roadmaps and how they're going to work together and who's going to be doing what and blah, blah, blah. But we have to prepare for that moment and make sure that European countries are willing to help out with security guarantees. Allies want to make sure that Putin will never, ever again try to attack Ukraine. That means that you will have Europeans active in Ukraine to make sure that the peace is kept and that it's sustainable and that it's enduring and lasting. Rutte also said that the USA remains committed to NATO Article 5. That's good because we're going to learn in a little bit that NATO is on rocky grounds at the moment. Rutte also said that USA, remains committed to Article 5. This sounds so that's that. Sorry, it's going to go on. Someone else speaking. Right. Okay. US will not provide security guarantees to Ukraine while the war continues, and Zelensky's demands to Washington on this issue are simply absurd. That's coming from Scott Bessent, I presume. Oh, no, he's the Treasury. So that's Secretary of Commerce is Lutnick, isn't it? But US will not provide security guarantees to Ukraine while the war continues. That's going to be a sticking point because that appears to be a deal breaker. So that is going to be what everyone is working on going forward. Ursula von der Leyen, who was at the summit as well on behalf of the European Parliament, commented on the summit. Europeans need to work on basically turning Ukraine into a steel porcupine that is indigestible for potential invaders. I love that. We urgently have to rearm Europe. European Commission will propose a plan on this at the European Council on the 6th of March. That's going to be a super important meeting. 6th of March. You might see... So Annalena Baerbock and German Aid to Ukraine's done a really good job of subtitling a video of her 12-minute speech. Go and check him out and check that speech out. She talks about potentially a 700 billion euro release of funding. I mean, that would be incredible. It is now of utmost importance to step up the defence investment for a prolonged period of time. It's for the security of the European Union, and we need in a geostrategic environment in which we live to prepare for the worst and therefore stepping up the defences. Ukraine needs comprehensive security guarantees to support her economic and military positions. And regarding a message for the US, We are ready, together with you, to defend democracy and the principle that there is a rule of law, that you cannot invade and bully your neighbour and cannot change borders with force. And of course, that appears to be fully in doubt at the moment, not just from the UK's position on Ukraine that seems to be completely wavering as they appear to have changed sides, but also the idea that they want to muscle in on essentially European territory or Danish territory in terms of Greenland. And then Canada being the 51st state. I mean, these look like contraventions of even Article 5 in terms of, I think, well, Articles 1, 2, 3, and 4, before that, which is, one of them, coercion, I think, economic coercion and stuff like that. So, the US are on really thin ground themselves in terms of NATO. And we shouldn't just think this pertains only to what Russia has done to Ukraine. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said Europe has woken up. The EU, Ukraine, UK, Norway, Turkey all speak with one voice about helping. Oh, the Turkish are there as well, of course. The Turkish flag there on the right, of course. Helping Ukraine, talk with one voice about helping Ukraine, the need for close transatlantic cooperation and strengthening the eastern border. So that's what we heard also from Mark Rutte. Now, Starmer is speaking, probably just finished. I'll see if there's any other information to share with you. Maybe this. I would not have taken this step if I were not sure that I would have a positive result from the US. Well, I think that remains to be seen. The agreement must ultimately include Russia, but it cannot dictate the conditions. And that's super important. Like, Russia can't dictate to Ukraine what's going on. And that's what's been happening so far. The US, through the US, Russia have been dictating all the constraints, all the concessions for Ukraine, and no one's been saying anything to Russia. Now, today, a number of countries have said they want to be a part of the European peace plan for Ukraine, says Starmer. Scholz has said that Russia's demands for Ukraine's demilitarization is unacceptable. That's good. Starmer announces a new meeting with Trump on a peace plan for Ukraine. Good. Tusk has said that Europe has woken up, as we heard, and now unanimously speaking about supporting Ukraine. Need for closer transatlantic cooperation and strengthening EU's eastern borders, we've heard. Good. Okay, what else? Just having a look here. Starmer's named 4 points that the leaders of these states agreed to at the summit. Continue to provide military assistance to Ukraine as long as the war continues, and also increase economic pressure on Russia. Brilliant. That economic pressure on Russia is good. Any lasting peace must ensure the sovereignty and security of Ukraine. Good. Ukraine must be at the table at any peace negotiations. Good. In fact, let's put this up here for you to look at. This is just coming from Nexta at the moment, I think Belarusian based news agency, although it's kind of exiled and whatnot. Any lasting peace must ensure the sovereignty and security of Ukraine. Ukraine must be at the table in any peace negotiations. Yes. In the event of a peace agreement, European leaders will seek to deter any future Russian invasion of Ukraine. That's a security guarantee, yes. A coalition of the willing will be created to protect Ukraine and guarantee peace in the country. This is going to be important because there is going to be a lot of trouble with, and we'll see a little aspect of this in a wee while, trouble with Hungary and Slovakia as well. Something really to watch out for. Okay, good to see that there are rallies in London. Simply massive majority support for Zelensky and Ukraine, and the real understanding that Putin poses a danger to the freedom we all enjoy there. So fantastic to see people coming out in support of Ukraine. Just good stuff from the British public, or at least I presume that there's going to be a lot of diaspora Ukrainian community members there. Now, the Slovak Prime Minister, as mentioned, Robert Fico, stated that he may block the conclusions of the EU summit on March the 6th, not today's one, but the official EU one on the 6th, if they do not include a demand for an immediate ceasefire and a resumption of Russian gas transit through Ukraine. Meanwhile, Orban insists on direct EU negotiations with Russia. There is going to be a lot of trouble with these guys, and Europe needs to work out what they are doing with particularly Hungary. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has called on the EU to start direct negotiations with Russia on a ceasefire, which I guess they will be doing through through this plan that Starmer's putting forward. But I presume Orban here is more talking about an approach that the US has at the moment, which is quick. We need a peace plan because that's going to benefit Russia, a really expedited peace plan. Patel had previously said the time has come to start considering a broad coalition of the willing, which is just what we're seeing coming out of today's meeting, for just peace in Ukraine. Peace on terms of the aggressor is called a capitulation and would only encourage all current and future aggressors. Free world must stand up to the evil. And this is the importance of the word just. And this is why you keep hearing Zelensky say it and European leaders say it, but we're not hearing it ever from the American negotiators or the president or vice president. They're not interested in a just peace. They just want peace. They just want peace. They don't want a just peace. Okay? Right. Now, this was a couple of days ago, but Gabrielis Landsbergis says, we said as long as it takes, and well, it's going to take a bit longer. Europe doesn't need to back down now, not for Putin, not for Trump, not for anyone else who tests us. We can step up and stand firm. Here's how. Push back. The US is important, but not omnipotent. Zelensky proved that pushing back can work. Firmness commands respect. We need to stick together. A united Europe can be strong enough to resist an isolationist America. We must tackle internal disruptors, so the aforementioned Hungary and Slovakia, so external disruptors find it harder to tackle us. Ignore provocations. There is no need for European leaders to be shocked by every wild tweet and every chaotic press conference. Standing firm for our shared principles is all we need to do in this drama. Prepare. Wishful thinking and polite discussions will not stop the huge changes in the world around us. We must work hard and fast to prepare our continent for the worst. If it happens, we will be ready. And if it doesn't, we'll be stronger. Remain values-based. So that entails swapping US support for Chinese guarantees won't work. It will only delay our demise. The world needs a values-based centre of gravity. The EU should offer that. Europe must also become its own security guarantor as soon as possible, period. And in fact, it's very clear, because even Pete Hegseth has talked about this in his nomination hearing. He said, values doesn't win you wars. So he's not bothered about values. He wants warriors, and the US is eschewing a values-based order at the moment, and they're going for kind of transactional, not even extortionate approaches to international geopolitics. And that might mean that Europe has to stand up for values in the world. Stay open, he says. Trump changes his position frequently. We must leave the door open for him to rethink and come back to us. If he decides to do that, he should be welcomed with open arms, not shunned or chastised. Interesting. Make Russia pay. 190 billion euros would be a pretty good start. Why are we looking for pennies down the backs of our sofas and burdening our children with decades of debt when we could just confiscate Russia's frozen assets right now? I really think that's important. I wonder if they talked about that today. I was expecting them to have done. Not a lot of information coming out about today, all things considered, but I'm sure, as I mentioned, it will eventually emerge. Right. Russia has been offering British citizens cash to commit acts of arson and sabotage in the UK and to sow unrest between Muslims and Christians. I have talked endlessly about that, and I've also told you that fire will be the future of disruption and easy terrorism. You don't need to make bombs and blow yourself up in your living room trying to make a bomb to then attach your body. You just go and burn things. And it's very easy, it's very cheap, and it's very destructive. And we're seeing it happen in Russia. We're seeing it happen in Ukraine, actually, with acts of arson against particularly vehicles. And we've seen it happen in Europe too. This will happen. This is the future, I think, of terrorism. It's really easy. So Russians are offering British citizens to do that, and then trying to drive a wedge between Christians and Muslims, which is pretty standard for them. Right, this image coming out of Serbia is heartwarming. The Russian-backed government of Serbia is under pressure tonight, so last night, as massive protests filled the centre of Belgrade. It seems that only the US hasn't gotten the note that Russian-backed fascism just isn't cool anymore. Good news there, and I hope that manifests in a change of government at some point. Now, Romania has just declassified some of the evidence against Karlin Georgescu. His campaign was not organic. and he and his associates seem to have broken several Romanian laws ranging from campaign finance irregularities to destabilising the constitutional order. These are grave accusations and can carry heavy prison terms for those found guilty. One thing is clear, Georgescu is a puppet manoeuvred by foreign actors to destabilise Romania, but of course he's the one that is being advocated for by people like Elon Musk and other US adjacent people, and it is deeply disturbing. Okay. This one has probably passed a lot of people by. So just to remind you or let you know of how Austrian politics is at the moment, you have this party called FPO, which is essentially the equivalent would be, I guess, AFD in Germany. A bit reformy AFD, that kind of like, you know, the whole personal freedoms thing, which ends up not really being about freedom and libertarian, but it actually just ends up being about the opposite of that, which is you're free if you do exactly what we want you to do, or if you are exactly like we want you to be. And so, you know, Eurosceptic against immigration, I mean, those kind of things are givens, but also lots of other things, and essentially pro-Russia. Okay. Now, they essentially kind of won the election in 2024 some time ago. This has been going on for a long time. The number of seats they took went up from 31 in 2019 to 57. So they're the majority party. Then there was this move to try and get a coalition of the people who didn't want to go, just like AFD, you know, don't want to go into coalition with them. And then it couldn't happen. And then it looked like the FPO were going to go into coalition with someone themselves. And now it appears that actually the others are going to go into coalition to block FPO from government. Now, on the one hand, this is good news because the far-right Freedom Party of Austria, literally, though they won the election, but all the opponents are forming a coalition and the FPO will therefore be blocked from government. How is this not bigger news? European democracy is a joke. So this person is like massively in favour of FPO, right? But from our point of view, if you're supporting Ukraine, on the one hand, this is really good news. So they won't be in government and Austrians will get a kind of centrist government made up of OVP, SPO, and NEOS, probably, and I think that's who it is. So that's good news. The bad news is when you have situations like this, sometimes you want like the bad party, if you like, to actually take control of the government to some degree, because then people realise what they have voted for, and when they start enacting things, a bit like in the US at the moment, by ripping out the government, by looking like they're going to give a massive tax cut to the rich and rip out Medicaid and Medicare and all these government provisions and Social Security, then people go, oh, really? That's what I voted for. Oh, my God. And then they absolutely reject that. But if you're forever stopping these people from coming to power, on the one hand, that's great because they don't ruin the government and they don't do horrible things for your country on behalf of, say, Ukraine. That's great. But actually, it allows that movement to grow and metastasize because they feel that the elites are working against the populace and that this is some kind of conspiracy and they won't let us get into power. And it breeds resentment and actually a greater and greater vote share, really. They become more and more popular, and that's your problem. So it's almost like ripping off a band-aid. You want them to get into power and then, you know, blow it all, because then everyone learns, oh, these guys aren't just really serious. They aren't serious about ruling, and you know, ruling is a lot more difficult than these really simplistic populist solutions to very complex problems. But anyway, that's what's happened in Austria. I thought I'd let you know. Russia will not be returned to the G7, which is what Trump wants, despite Trump's proposals, said the German Finance Minister Jörg Kukis. Quote, the G7's condemnation of Russia's aggressive war is very clear, especially on the third anniversary of Russia's brutal attack, Kukis noted. As much as Trump might want that, there are 6 other countries, and I don't think any of them are going to be fans of having Russia back in. Okay. We're going to go on to NATO before we go to the US. There's some stuff to say about NATO. So a couple of days ago, Shashant Joshi said this after Hein Gurman said, next potential steps, Trump will blame Ukraine and Europe for a no deal. He will claim that they are against peace and will use this to withdraw at least partly from NATO, a more miraculous rise from the ashes of a defeated power than the death of Empress Elizabeth of Russia in 1762. To which Shashank Joshi from The Economist says, I don't think Trump withdrawal from NATO is likely at this stage, but there is a very real risk that Trump blames Ukraine and Europe for a failure of diplomacy, avoids the needs to apply pressure to Russia and aids normalization with Russia, allows him to abandon Ukraine with less blame for consequences. Now, all of these options are either happening already, we're seeing it, or they are more probable. So I think it is certainly more probable that US will pull out of NATO, even if it's more probable, even if it isn't probable. Like, percentage-wise, it's not going to be over 50%, right? But it is on the table to the point where you have now had today Elon Musk saying, I agree, to Gunter Eagleman, who's a despicable source on Twitter that Elon Musk loves because he loves his horrible sources. It's time to leave NATO and the UN. Okay, and you've got a move of people saying this, and that includes people like Senator Mike Lee, who is wanting the US to pull out of NATO, and he suggested it. You've got, I think there might be a motion coming up from a Republican in the House of Representatives along those lines. Cat Turd, who's another one of these sources, you might go, oh, why are you just telling us what the random opinions of these random people on the internet? It's because these people drive huge. They have massive reach to their massive audiences, and they drive a lot of the conversations online, and then that whips up a storm, and then people go along with it. I can't tell you the number. I was just speaking to someone that helps out the channel, saying that how one of their family members has been caught up in a lot of this rhetoric and is deep in to MAGA now, from a UK point of view, deep in with MAGA, and goes along with all this stuff. So this does change people's minds. It does take people along with it. And, someone like Cat Turd has got a huge following, 3.5 million followers, right? 3.5 million followers, one of which is Elon Musk. Often regurgitates Cat Turd stuff. So never forget, the UK, Canada, and most of Europe chose Ukraine over the USA yesterday. Ukraine is their problem now, and enjoy the tariffs. So, there's this kind of rejection of Europe, there's a rejection of NATO, there's a rejection of the UN going on in these sources. And indeed, just to show you how important, when I talk about those sources, there are people in positions of power in America, in the US, who use these sources to drive, to found their own knowledge base. Right, here is Rick Grenell, who is likely to take over from Marco Rubio if Marco Rubio steps aside. I don't think that's going to happen, but he's at the center of the American government, Rick Grenell, and he was previously in the Trump administration. He's saying this is very serious in response to Amuse, who's another one of these horrible, horrible sources. Obama's team, including Antony Blinken, Victoria Nuland, Susan Rice, and Alexander Vindman, advised Zelensky to reject Trump's deal in a violation of the Logan Act, which is absolute nonsense. But Rick Grenell's like, this is very serious. And you got the people, these policymakers in government using, like, as Jen Kiev says, the entire leadership of the US now sources all data from Russian disinformation accounts on social media. So these are not only like total MAGA accounts, but they're also total Russia propaganda accounts. Kareem Rafai saying Trump's special envoy is promoting a conspiracy theory about the Zelensky White House meeting originating from a random anonymous disinformation account. Yeah, absolutely. Matthew Nicol, Ultra MAGA, Patriot, and Macedonian, blah, 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 blah. And these are the people that Rick Grenell's and Elon Musk's are deferring to as a source of information. It's really, really disturbing. As Republicans Against Trump says, naturally, Elon Musk wants the US to leave NATO. Has he ever taken a position that isn't aligned with Russia or China? That's the question that needs to be answered. Why has he never said anything bad against Russia or China? And why is he consistently denigrating democracy? Why is he consistently denigrating Ukraine? And why is he consistently denigrating the EU and trying to pull European nations apart? What is going on there? Now, angry staffer says a bunch of Trump's most influential advisors are advocating for the US to leave NATO and the UN. Short-sighted reactionary morons. You should really ask yourselves why anyone that has the US interests at heart would want us to leave the most powerful alliance in history. And it's the most powerful and successful military alliance in history, including Julia Davis then chimes in, who is a journalist at the Daily Beast and controls the Russian Media Monitor YouTube channel that translates all of the Russian propagandists on a nightly basis, including his most influential advisor in Moscow. There you go. Now, talking about NATO, this is retired US Admiral James Stavridis talking about kind of what's going on in the US concerning this. Now, we could be looking at the last days of NATO. We could see an end to NATO and a start of what might be called the European Treaty Organization. Isolationism will not succeed for the United States. Now, this is a 5-minute interview. There is a little clip of it. So just to give you a quick excerpt here.
I think we are headed possibly, I don't want to overstate this, I don't want to be overly dramatic, but we could be looking at the last days of NATO.
And there you go, the last days of NATO. And that is a very serious concern for those who are worried about the present state of international security. Okay. Now, in terms of like Elon Musk's opinions, it's worth reminding ourselves that there is now presently a big pushback. People have said that one of the, not the missteps, because it depends whether you think that the Democrats are playing a long, slow game here, letting the Republicans eat themselves and then say, look, this is a people movement against the Republicans. This isn't driven by the Democrats. This is literally what these guys wanted, as in the electorate. And so we're going to go along with that. And what you're seeing is a people-driven movement that is not so much being whipped up by the Democrats, but being championed by the Democrats. And that, I don't know if that's really what's going on, but there is some merit to that approach. Now, you're starting to see people come out, and because there's been a lot of talk about how, hang on, Bernie Sanders, as an independent, is talking about, look, this is an oligarchy, this is a billionaire class, these are unelected billionaires and elected billionaires, unelected billionaires who have forced themselves into the government, i.e. Elon Musk, or unelected billionaires who have been nominated to cabinet positions. So 13 billionaires in government, and then some of these have also been elected. Right, these people are ruling the country for their own benefit. What about, they're cutting Social Security, they're cutting Medicaid and Medicare, but they're all right, Jack. These guys are billionaires. What about you guys? So you will start to see people now mobilize on a popular grassroots level to go against billionaires, right? Not so much an eat the rich, but hang on, this ain't cool. And you're starting to see that here. So these are Tesla dealerships that are being surrounded, as you can see here. I'll turn the sound off to that, but these are people who are crowding around Tesla dealerships and letting their opinions be known. You'll probably see share levels in Tesla go down. You'll probably see sales, go further down because they're in trouble already. This is Lower Manhattan. It's not the only city in the US where protests against far-right fascist Elon Musk, says Bill Madden, and the Trump regime's Nazification of America are happening. This is a Tesla dealership in Boston. So it's not just Lower Manhattan. This is one in Boston that's also being protested, and there's lots of, boycott Tesla, etc., etc. Now, also, remember that whenever Russia says, yay, this is awesome, to something the US does, it's evidently and obviously something that benefits Russia, right? And if they are cheering on decisions the American government is making, and we'll come to this again a little bit later, then that's probably not a good thing, and the US really need to think about their policies. Well, here, America is declaring independence from the globalist death cult system, says Russia Today, RT. Real Alex, so they are celebrating Alex Jones, who's a wingnut, who himself is celebrating Musk, who's a wingnut, calling for the US to leave the UN and NATO. So the RT are loving what Elon Musk and others are saying here, which indicates it's probably not a good idea to do so. Now, on NATO, I got a lot of time for Kallas. Let's listen to her.
NATO is not the thing that Russia is afraid of. Russia is afraid of democracy expanding to Russia, because NATO has never, and any NATO countries have never attacked Russia. The point is that why are we in NATO is because we are afraid of Russia. And the only thing that really works, the only security guarantee that works is the NATO's umbrella. NATO.
Absolutely. NATO is a way forward, and it would be the cheapest way for allies of Ukraine to provide a security guarantee for Ukraine. It's so frustrating that the US don't want it and other nations don't want it. And you're like, there is no cheaper way to sort this out. You know, make it work somehow. Change your whatever, constitution, whatever. But in NATO, you make it so now, whatever peace deal is done, if Russia attack again, Ukraine is now a NATO country. And they won't attack again. They just won't. And it's so frustrating because that's the cheapest. Because you don't then have to put all these peacekeepers up and down the front line. You're like, if you attack, NATO are going to pile in. And we just stay back in NATO countries, just doing a normal thing. So it's not costing us gajillions having troops for 20 years along the front line, right? But if you attack, then we'll go into fifth gear. Right, moving on to US stuff more directly now. Edward Hunter Christie says, let's go to Shashank Joshi. An admin throwing away its leverage. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth last week ordered an US Cyber Command to stand down from all planning against Russia, including offensive digital actions, according to 3 people familiar with the matter. So there are these rumors, claims that the US is disbanding some of it, or it's cutting back on its cyber warfare against Russia at a time when Russia is ramping its cyber warfare up, right? And we're hearing that they're also going after people in the UK to do arson sabotage, etc., etc. That's the time where they're like, there's nothing to worry about here, because they're so thin-skinned about this whole like Zelensky and Ukraine thing that they're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe Zelensky, so let's hand all the power to Russia and China. There you go. Zelensky, have everything, guys, have everything. It's crazy. Edward Hunter Christie, if you weren't shocked enough today, here's one more item. Your US Cyber Command is standing down from planning against Russia. The US has changed sides and it is now pro-Russian power. It's clearly what Trump wanted all along. And, the question is, why is this going on? What? This is clearly only to the benefit of Russia, right? Why would you do this? What is going on? To the point where John Bolton is just saying, and this is like a 10-minute piece, so I'm not gonna show it. As Michael Weiss says, who's a great journalist on the matter, when Trump's own former national security advisor says he's on Russia's side, believe him. So John Bolton, national security advisor under Trump and Vance have declared themselves to be on Russia's side in the Russia-Ukrainian war. This is a catastrophic mistake for America's national security. And let's be clear, Trump and Vance now personally own that policy. It is not the view of the majority of Americans, empirically true, by the way, of either or no political party. And that's absolutely right. So they are diverging, the Trump administration, from the general consensus in the UK, in the US population and electorate, including their own Republican voters. Now, Christopher Miller from the Financial Times says, when we say the Trump administration sounds and behaves a lot like the Kremlin, well, you don't need to take our word for it. Just listen to the Kremlin tell you the Trump administration, quote, largely coincides with our vision. I mean, this is incredible. Max Seddon says, Dmitry Peskov, Putin's spokesman, hails the Trump administration. And this is what I was saying earlier. Like, if Russia today are championing what Elon Musk and Alex Jones are saying, then they're probably saying the wrong things. And if Dmitry Peskov is championing what the Trump administration is doing presently, then the Trump administration is probably doing the wrong things. It's that freaking simple, guys. So Dmitry Peskov says that he hails the Trump administration for, quote, rapidly changing US foreign policy configurations. This largely coincides with our vision. The Russians are saying the US foreign policy is largely aligned with Russian foreign policy. It wouldn't surprise me if next year the US invades Ukraine from the other side. To the point where the Moscow Times is reporting that Kremlin says the US foreign policy shift aligns with its own vision. This is now, that's a comment that is creating news articles. And Adam Kinzinger is like, yep, just leaving this here. This aligns with exactly what we've all been saying. Edward Hunter Christie, actually, let's go to Alexander Clarkson first, who says a lot of Americans, even liberal ones, underestimate how much anger is building up towards Washington among those British and German social groups who were once the most fervent advocates for the alliance with the United States. Now, I can tell you from my own, like I've told you this morning, my own father is now swearing about Trump, and he was actually a very rare Trump fan. There aren't many Trump fans in the UK, really, honestly speaking. But there were people who were kind of pro those policy positions of say MAGA, right? And what Trump is doing is damaging his own kind of message, his own administration, and his own PR big time at the moment. And there are lots of what would otherwise be very sympathetic voices in the UK and Germany, as according to Alexander Clarkson, who are being put off. And I talked about the Daily Mail and the Daily Express headlines suggesting that if you've lost the Daily Mail and Daily Express in this country as someone on the right, then what are you doing? I mean, that they should be an absolute shoo-in, a real gimme for a right-wing politician. But Trump appears to have lost the Daily Mail and the Daily Express, and that is staggering. Edward Hunter Christie says many well-intended American friends are in oh dear mode, whereas many Europeans are touching their lips, seeing a bit of blood and saying, "You hit me?" There is just this big chasm that appears to be growing between Europe and the US. Now, the US will no longer write blank checks for a distant war without a real peace. Zelensky provoked Vance during a meeting with Trump, said White House press secretary after that, and that was yesterday. So it appears to be no more aid going to Ukraine. That is a huge problem for Ukraine, obviously. And then you're getting the wheeling out of all sorts of people after the White House fracas. And this is, I find this disgusting. This is Marco Rubio. Now, Marco Rubio was supposed to be like the sensible guy in the administration, and this was a guy that Democrats were happier to vote for. His vote sailed through Congress because he was like, well, he said sensible things previously said some pretty critical things of Donald Trump when he was running against him. But anyway, he said some really good things about democracy, NATO, Ukraine, etc., etc. But now he's saying this.
Can we get them to a table to negotiate? That's our goal. Don't do anything to disrupt that. And that's what Zelensky did, unfortunately, is he found every opportunity to try to Ukraine-splain on every issue. Then he confronts the vice president. When the vice president says, the goal here is diplomacy, he immediately jumps in and challenges the vice president. Well, what kind of diplomacy? So we all understand, okay, that Putin is not going to be an easy negotiator. So can we get them to a table to...
That is Marco Rubio just really turned the party line. He's gone full behind. He's got full behind Trump. Tim White is angry about this. I can almost accept that Trump has always been anti-America, doing Russia's bidding. At least you know where you are. But scum like Hegseth and Rubio, who know the truth, spoke in favour of Ukraine, and both of them did prior to their the election win, yet suddenly sell out their country to back Trump. They are a disgrace. And indeed, he later says, and I find this interesting, and this is definitely the case. Well, it's definitely the case that lots of people have been rolled out to back Trump from the administration machine. And the question is, does this signify anything? So Tim White says the corrupt regime in Washington, D.C. must have got some bad internal polling about Friday's bullying. And that could well be possible because at the moment, like, I know it's McConish.com, like he's a CNN reporter, but overwhelmingly people blamed Trump and JD Vance for what happened. And only 4.33% of like almost 80,000 people blamed Zelensky. So, okay, if we can learn, there might be selection biases there going on, but I think overwhelmingly people have probably thought it was not really on. Because if you listen to it, even I know Fox will try and sell it as being all Zelensky's fault, but I'm fairly sure that they won't like some of the internal polling. I'm sure there must be some internal polling that would suggest that it's not as big a coup as they thought it might have been. So Tim White then says all key figures have been forced out on Sunday, even General Keith Kellogg, to besmirch Ukraine and Zelensky. Even Kash Patel made up more lies about corruption, and we're going to come to that in a second. But on Marco Rubio being sort of rolled out and saying all this stuff, and his position in these negotiations with Russia about Ukraine, but without Ukraine, that appear to just be ways of extorting natural resources from Ukraine or getting those in close deals with Russia, has led people like Chris Murphy, and like I've said before, watch out for this guy, I think he's going to run for president. Do you regret voting to confirm Marco Rubio as Secretary of State?
Marco Rubio was there. He didn't participate in the conversation, but he was with the National Security Advisor when they asked Zelensky to leave the White House after that blow-up, and he has been very supportive of what happened in that meeting. You voted to approve his nomination to be Secretary of State. You still think you made the right choice?
Nope, it was a mistake. It was a mistake. I think a lot of us thought that Marco Rubio was going to stand up to Donald Trump on an issue like this, that when Donald Trump decided to align America with dictatorships, again, in order to make it easier for him to steal from the American people, to turn America into an illiberal democracy in which, just like Russia, the oligarchs, the economically powerful people in America rule and the rest of us just feed the powerful. I thought when Donald Trump decided to do that, when Donald Trump would come to him and say, help me move America closer to Russia and to Russian values, Marco Rubio would stand up to him. Marco Rubio has not, and that's been a great disappointment to many of his former colleagues in the Senate.
Secretary.
Yeah. Couldn't agree anymore. But going back to what Tim White was saying, like even Kash Patel is coming out, and I mean, just listen to this.
I've asked this Congress to investigate where has this money gone. The American people are owed that answer because it's our money. It's our taxpayer dollars.
And there's a lot of really good reason.
That sounds like it's on no, that's 1 time speed.
To be concerned because the Ukraine was known as a place of corruption, a place of money laundering.
Yeah, it's not like we sent $1 billion as if that was.
Someone sped this up to get it under a minute, so apologies if you're listening to me sped up because this will be like chipmunk.
Even a small number to begin with, right? We've sent 100 times that to one country. I don't know how this Congress is allowed to get away with it. And Zelensky is out there. He went on the world stage and said Russia fired a rocket into Poland, which would literally be an act of war. Well, it turned out that Russia fired no such rocket. It turned out that the rocket came from the Ukraine and was fired into Poland.
And it was a mistake, basically.
If Zelensky's going to go out there and beg the world for more money and come to the U.S. and sit in the well of our Congress and say, we want more money, and then call and demand the new Speaker of the House provide more and more money, and call Mitch McConnell and say, we need more and more machinery, he needs to be more prepared about global statements that bring us to the precipice of war than doing what he did last fall with this missile attack, or this missile launch, I should say. And we just can't have full faith and trust by giving a leader $100 billion and having him say, I'm not telling you where the money went.
So what's really frustrating about this, so, investigations into this, well, actually, it is the most closely monitored aid that I think the US has ever given. I mean, you think of aid packages that the US has given before and the transparency or not of those and what went to Afghanistan and what, so on and so forth. There are loads of checks and balances. There's an entire inspectorate team out there, and this is just Russian disinformation. And it's disgusting that, you're hearing this stuff from Marco Rubio, you're hearing this stuff from Kash Patel, and it's just like they are trying to be on Russia's side. It's deeply, deeply disturbing, and it gets worse in a way because the people that should be closest to Ukraine in terms of trying to, you would assume, advocate for Ukraine in negotiations, Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor. Zelensky's like an ex who just wants to argue about everything you said 9 years ago instead of developing a relationship, said Mike Waltz. I mean, how insulting is this? When did these guys ever say anything about Russia? When did they ever say anything about Putin? Putin's getting a free bloody pass. These people are disgusting. And I'm going to say it for what it is now. Mike Waltz is disgusting. Marco Rubio is disgusting. The entire Trump administration is disgusting. End of. There is no value in what any of these people... None of these people have decent values. I'll say that. Quote, Zelensky is clearly focused on believing that he needs to fact check and correct every little nuance. He wasn't fact checking every little nuance because otherwise he would have been there an awful lot longer. He asked Vance whether what justification he had for trusting Putin to keep to a deal. And I think that's fairly justifiable as a question to ask. So I think Mike Waltz there is being disgusting. During negotiations to end the war, Russia must agree to deploy European peacekeepers in Ukraine. And Ukraine must agree to certain territorial concessions in exchange for further security guarantees. Well, thanks, Mike Waltz, for doing that and negotiating on behalf of both sides there. And you're telling everyone what they must do. Ukraine will do what they deem they must do, and Russia will do what they deem they must do. I mean, gee, who's the dictator here? It doesn't sound like it's Zelensky, it sounds like it's you. Right, then we're hearing this from Trump. So this is Trump's latest. Trump seriously wants those minerals in Ukraine, and the only way to getting them is with Ukrainian approval, which is a possibility when security guarantees or NATO membership is offered. So Ukraine doesn't have such bad cards after all. And indeed, if Trump is coming back with this, then him turning around and berating Zelensky for not having any cards is not true. Trump is proving this with his own words. So Trump says, now Zelensky will have no choice but to back down and accept Trump's terms. But here's the genius part. Trump is actually protecting Ukraine without dragging the US into war. By negotiating a mineral deal, Trump ensures that Americans will be involved in Ukraine's mining industry. This prevents Russia from launching an invasion because attacking Ukraine would mean endangering American lives, something that would force the US to respond. Now, the problem with this, and this is what he said basically in the meeting with Zelensky in the White House, it's essentially not true. Because there were foreign workers and American workers in Ukraine when Ukraine was invaded, and that didn't stop the Russians. So I think this is the weakest of security guarantees you can possibly think up. But nonetheless, Trump played both sides like a master chess player. In the end, Zelensky will have no choice but to concede. Now, I don't know who said this originally because this is in the third person. So Donald Trump, though, appears to have reposted this. Trump played both sides like a master chess player. In the end, Zelensky will have no choice but to concede because without US support, Ukraine cannot win a prolonged war against Russia. And once US companies have mining operations in Ukraine, Putin will be unable to attack without triggering massive international consequences. Don't underestimate Donald Trump. In this game of chess, he's 10 moves ahead of everyone. I mean, I'd say that's absolute nonsense in terms of thinking Trump is that clever. But it does show that there's leverage for Ukraine because there's desperation there coming. Well, you need to do this minerals deal. Well, I was going to do the minerals deal and then he kicked me out of the White House. So actually, do you want me to do this or not? Okay, if you want me to do this, we need security guarantees. And we need better ones than that. So honestly, like, if I wouldn't sign that deal if that was all that you were going to get out of it. American workers in Ukraine. It's just, I don't think that's good enough. Now, Speaker Johnson, Mike Johnson, the House of Representatives Majority Speaker for the GOP, the Republican Party, has said that Zelensky should return to negotiations with the US, quote, with gratitude, or someone else should lead the country to it. It's this whole idea of you should come here and thank us. Thank us. You need to thank us. It's like he's 33 times he's thanked just on Twitter alone. He's thanked the American people and American governments and Biden and blah, blah, blah. Why should he thank the present Republican administration when they have given zero? And if you don't believe me that they have given zero, you should look at, oh my goodness, where do we have it? I'm sure I've got it here. Oh, I meant to have it. Let's go and find it. So here it is. So fascinating. This came out on Fox today. Fox News puts this up. I'm just staggered by this. So Republican channel Fox News says, War Translated, showed how much the US allocated in aid to Ukraine during the Biden administration compared to the Trump administration. $175 billion under Biden, $0 under the Trump administration, to which people like Ukraine Battle Map have said actually 118 billion has been allocated to Ukraine in Congress in military, economic, humanitarian aid. If they just read the bills first, they'd see a lot goes to responding to the situation in Ukraine, like buying US nuclear submarines for billions of dollars. That's not for Ukraine, etc., etc. So you get those arguments about how much of that, and then economists for Ukraine have come out by saying, well, actually a third of what the US has actually given a third of what they claim they've given in terms of military aid as well. So, you can interpret this in different ways. But the point is that actually, what have they got to be thankful for? And Mike Johnson says you need to come back with gratitude. Look at how amazing we are. Well, no, he's been very thankful to Biden and his administration. Why does he need to be thankful to you? You can be thankful to the American people as taxpayers, as he often says. And he actually started that White House press thing with a thank to the American people, I do believe. And that's good and right and proper. But I don't know why he has to be thankful to the Trump administration. Now, FBI Director Kash Patel has instructed Congress to investigate where hundreds of billions of dollars were sent to Ukraine. According to him, there are many reasons for concern because Ukraine is a place of money laundering and corruption, as we heard before. Here it is. I did have it lined up. Dang it. Anyway, there you go. You get the point now. So, as I've said, there's been plenty of tracking for that. And in fact, if you want to know where most of it went, go and look in the US, because 75% of the military aid funding went to, or 70% went to the US, went to military industrial concerns inside the US. Okay, moving on. We are witnessing the good people of USA rising up. Are we witnessing them rise up against a president who hasn't even completed 40 days? Admittedly, these are Dems, but wow, there's passion here at Hofstra University in a district won easily by Trump. Democratic Congressman Tom Suozzi gets a standing ovation for speaking out. Tom Suozzi is interesting because he is and I think he references this at the beginning. If you don't know him, he won in a special election before the general election. He won as a Democrat in a time when they were quite embattled. And he won by reaching across the aisle to the Republicans, speaking strong on immigration from within New York. And this won him a lot of plaudits and support from Republicans. And I think he references this at the beginning. But this is about the level of anger at the moment and support for Ukraine.
Listen, everybody's freaking out. Everybody's like, I'm Mr. Let's work together. Let's try and find common ground.
Yeah.
And what happened in the White House yesterday, I was so pissed off. I knew you had to get that out of your system. I wanted you to get that out of your system. Listen, everybody.
So at a time when, Republican Congress people are getting a lot of pushback, maybe from Democratic voters at town halls where they're like really angry about the destruction of the US government. We've got a standing ovation for someone merely saying, look, I was really pissed off about what happened at the White House yesterday. So there is a strong sense of support for Ukraine in the American population. Trump is now even pushing Ukraine toward China, says Jane Kiev. It's all incredible, the speed at which the US is being destroyed by one man. Now, this is Andrei Yermak here. I will read it out to you what he says.
Foreign affairs. We appreciate it. We are very much interested to have the strong relations with China, and we think it's time to arrange the meetings between our leaders. I think it's momentum. It's momentum because China can play important role in the peace process.
Will we see more meetings?
So that's fascinating. Right, Andrei Yermak kind of knows what he's doing. Some people say he's the most powerful person in the Ukrainian government, right? A lot of people don't like him because they think actually it is him putting all the strings and whatnot. Okay. This, I think, is probably very clever statecraft here, which is they might not actually be planning on getting into bed with China. But if you put out there that, well, now's the time we want our leaders to meet with the Chinese leaders, then all of those Americans that are still hawkish on China and see China as a main enemy are going to be like, oh, hang on, right, if we now push Ukraine towards China, we might need to go back and et cetera, et cetera. And so that is, or they are going to say, we're going to go to China because actually we need help here and we need the resources that only like a massive entity like China can provide for us. And if they can do that, then, it's time to start speaking to them and either potentially playing or really playing one side off against the other. That is potentially very clever politicking from Andriy Yermak. Then we're seeing Russia do similar kind of 4D chess here. Well, this is quite, I think, obvious. I would do this if I was Putin and had the same objectives as Putin wanted. So there it is. We're literally watching Trump being bought by Putin on live TV. Putin offers Trump a better rare earth minerals deal in his country and says Russia has significantly larger rare earth reserves than Ukraine. Wake the F up, MAGA. Trump is a transactional narcissist with a debt to pay and a country to leverage. The deal isn't just about minerals, it's about setting up a scenario where Russia and Trump both win at America's expense. Trump does not care if this weakens the US long term. He just needs it to weak enough while he's in control so that no one can stop him from doing whatever he wants. So you put this together with deconstructing the government, pulling back on cyber warfare against Russia, getting into bed with Russia, doing a deal with Russia. This is the direction of travel for the Trump administration. It seems pretty obvious. And I think, when a conservative Bret Stephens in the New York Times says this, you gotta pay attention. As Seth Abramson says, anyone with any sense knows that today was an absolute disaster in the White House and a disgrace for the US. If Roosevelt had told Churchill to sue for peace on any terms with Adolf Hitler and to fork over Britain's coal reserves to the United States in exchange for no American security guarantees, so go back to what Trump is just still demanding in terms of the minerals deal, it might have approximated what Trump did to Zelensky. Whatever one might say about how Zelensky played his cards poorly, either by failing to behave with the degree of all fours sycophancy that Trump demands or to maintain his composure in the face of JD Vance's disingenuous provocations, this was a day of American infamy. So you've got your more thoughtful conservatives here going, yeah, this sucks for American security. And then you got Max Seddon saying a former spy and close friend of Putin has been engineering a restart of Russia's Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline to Europe with the backing of US investors. A once unthinkable move that shows the depth of Trump's rapprochement with Moscow. Getting into bed with Moscow, wanting to reopen the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. As Jay Kiev says, rebuilding Russia's war machine is now the primary goal of the Trump administration. And then Konstantin from a Ukrainian says, Rubio, amazing strategy in action. Chinese President Xi tells Russian security advisor Shoigu that the two countries are, quote, true friends like steel repeatedly tempered by fire. China and Russia are claiming they are closer than they've ever been. So you can add to that the SEC in the US has just halted its fraud prosecution of Justin Sun, a Chinese national who's put more than $50 million in Trump's pocket since November through the purchase of crypto tokens from a Trump-backed company, World Liberty Financial. So stopping investigations that look like China is able to gain purchase with the Americans here, and it's worth then going to, I'm sure I've got it, there's some crypto news concerning, no, where is it? It's I've got some crypto news that would actually be really sensible to have put next to that, but it doesn't seem like I have got that correct. So yeah, no, sorry about that. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, so, sorry, going back to, yeah. Anyway, this memo is out that, this Chinese national put more than $50 million in Trump's pocket. The investigation into him is being shut down. Edward Hunter Christie says Trump is surrendering to Russia in the cyber realm. He has ordered a CISA, we talked about before, not to follow or report on Russian threats. Conceivably, one can negotiate a truce in antagonistic cyber activities, but asking the professionals to not even look suggests treason. It's deeply concerning again there. And then Mehdi Hassan says, I've always been skeptical of folks who say that Trump is a literal Russian asset or that Moscow has compromat on him and the Russian obsession hurt the Dems in term one. But how does one explain this? How do you justify this? How? So what's he talking about? A person familiar with the matter who spoke to The Guardian on condition of anonymity said, analysts at the agency were verbally informed that they were not to follow or report on Russian threats, even though this had previously been a main focus for the agency. The person said work that was being done on something Russia-related was, in effect, nixed. They have stopped looking at any Russian influence inside or concerning the US. It is capitulating to Russia. It is absolutely incredible. Let me get this straight, says Art Candy. Donald Trump didn't get a ceasefire deal between Ukraine and Russia. He clearly didn't end the war, which, by the way, he said is going to end on day one or even before his inauguration. He didn't get Zelensky to sign a minerals deal. He ended the peace talks and cancelled a press conference. And MAGA thinks he's a brilliant negotiator. Like Fox News was saying he should get the Nobel Peace Prize. And if he doesn't, it's not worth anything. I think if he does get it, it's not worth anything. Honestly, some MAGA people are saying how amazing Trump is. Trump has actually effed everything up. Like, he's actually failed on doing any of the stuff other than completely capitulating to Russia. Like, if his metrics of success are bending over for Russia, then well done, Trump. You've done a good job. And Ukraine battle map has something. There's something in this. Like, right now, bring back Jake Sullivan. Do you know everything I said about Jake Sullivan? Warts and all, I would have him 20 times over Mike Walls and the present American administration. Mike Walls is bad or worse than Jake Sullivan. He doesn't want to send US military aid to Ukraine. He wants to negotiate with Russia without Ukraine, force a $500 billion minerals deal in return for no security guarantees, ideally, and then gets offended by Ukraine not accepting US demands. Like, Jake Sullivan was like, yeah, we're going to keep giving them aid. We're going to loads of, still like $4 billion of presidential drawdown authority that he had appropriated or his government had done. You know, Biden was like, yeah, more sanctions. We're going to tighten sanctions. We're going to keep helping Ukraine. Trump gets in, screws everything up, and now everything's up in the air, and it looks like Russia are being given a Lazarus moment. Honestly, bring back Jake Sullivan. Jake Sullivan is 15 times a negotiator any of these absolute peanuts are. Josh Shapiro, I think, has it right. Let's listen to him.
When Donald Trump took the oath of office.
By the way, he's a governor up in Pennsylvania, and he's also been touted for maybe a presidential potential.
He took the oath of office to be president of the United States and be the leader of the free world, as presidents have been for many generations, stretching back even before Ronald Reagan and the changes that came there. He went from being the leader of the free world to now, in just 1 month, wanting to be a leader of a single hemisphere and leaving China and Russia in charge of the other hemispheres. That is deeply, deeply dangerous for America's national security interests. It is deeply troubling to see a president retreat in the face of Vladimir Putin and President Xi. We need a president who's going to stand up for America's interests, who wants to be the leader of the free world. He has demonstrated nothing but weakness when it comes to national security over the course of his first month in office. Ben, we need to talk about this more. America's national security is at risk as a result of these decisions the president has made. And
absolutely, and spot on there. And I just want to just give you and this is just an excerpt from it, but you know, compare that kind of thinking and the kind of thinking you would have had in the Biden administration to this. Now, this is a former advisor to Trump, Jan Halper-Hayes, on LBC Radio in the UK. Just absolutely stunning.
I mean, we would both agree, wouldn't we, for a start, that Putin started the war?
Yeah, what I would say is that Putin legally violated international law. Morally, he thought he was right, and strategically,
But you would
He
agree
was
that
doing-
morally he was wrong.
I know I would not agree morally is wrong. I would agree legally he was wrong.
You would agree.
Honestly, this is who we're dealing with. So I don't want any kind of sugarcoating this. This is a former advisor to Trump, but in that world, saying that Putin was not morally wrong to invade. That's what we've come to.
You would not think that a man who literally, as we speak, still sends drone attacks to kill Ukrainian civilians is morally wrong.
Oh, and you think that Ukraine isn't doing anything to the Russians?
Ukraine didn't invade Russia. Russia invaded Ukraine. That you wouldn't agree that was morally wrong.
Okay, all right. You know what? That is 3 years ago.
Right.
You
so
know,
if we were sat in 1942, would you have been on the radio? I mean, we would both.
And so on. I mean, the full one is there. But so what happened is she doesn't agree that it was morally wrong to do so, and that was 3 years ago anyway. And points to the fact that Ukraine still sends drones to Russia, and then she eventually hung up. Honestly, insane. Now, I don't know if this is true. I don't know Halfway Post as a source. Some people saying, is this true? What's the source for this? Blah, blah, blah. But the claim here is that Donald Trump is reportedly furious that so many European leaders are pledging enough support, money and arms to Ukraine to sideline him completely, and was overheard shouting at his staffers, this is supposed to be my deal and my Nobel Peace Prize. Wouldn't surprise me. Poe's law, I mean, it's so plausible that if it's someone doing satire, then, there's very little difference. But anyway, pinch of salt. Chris Murphy again. Measles outbreaks are back. Grocery and gas prices are up. Bird flu is spreading. All our allies hate us. Air travel is getting unsafe. The stock market is tanking. The government is about to shut down. And he's only been president for 6 weeks. This is just the beginning. Honestly, if you think this is a good presidency, the American economy was flying. It was humming along. It was doing fine. If you think this is all going well for the US, Jesus wept. You need to sort out your calculations and evaluations. Speaker Mike Johnson. We've already had that. Right. Now, Justin Trudeau's confirmed Canada's intention to respond to US tariffs. Canada is expected to resume its response to Trump's actions by imposing tariffs on $150 billion worth of US goods once the tariffs threatened by the US president take effect. And indeed, he's just said about them, because this is all to do with the deals and the meeting in London today. Everything's on the table regarding Canadian peacekeeping forces in Ukraine. We're not going to get ahead of the discussions on how to keep a peace. That isn't yet in place, but Canada will be there and is open to doing what is necessary. Canada has been one of the strongest countries in support of Ukraine from the beginning and trained up to 40,000 Ukrainian troops. So that's really good. We're also hearing from Antonio Costa from the European Council. We must learn from the past. We cannot repeat the Minsk experience. We cannot repeat all the Afghanistan's tragedy. And we need for this strong security guarantee and peacekeeping to go ahead hand in hand with peacekeeping. And Ursula von der Leyen has said the rearmament plan for Europe, which is urgent, should be presented on March the 6th. So you're going to hear a lot on March the 6th. Going back to Canada, though, Canada needs to be closer to Europe and the United Kingdom, says the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Melanie Joly. We are in a security crisis, she added. And just to show you just a couple of random things at the end here, just to finish the video, I just wanted to show you this the other day. I've talked about this a number of times. Here's the video.
Thank you very much.
This was Elon Musk's showing at the cabinet event that was a real kind of TV ratings thing.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris. Albert, back here.
Thank you very much. Pulitzer Prize.
Sir, how many peacekeepers are you going to send there?
What will you do? How will you dress? Lawrence, look at Lawrence. This guy's making a fortune. He never had it so good. Lawrence, say we did a great job, please. Okay? Say it was unbelievable.
Just before the cut there, you got a hot mic incident where he says Mark, say we did a good job, please. Say it was unbelievable. He is telling the press how to report that event. And he's not like, that's not a joke. He's telling, that is dictatorship 101. There you have it. You're going to tell them we did a great job and it was unbelievable. Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth was warned that Mexico to fix its cartel and smuggling mess or face US military help, per the Wall Street Journal. So we might see the US military get involved in Mexico. Some people might be actually quite pleased about that. That's not that unpopular an idea. At a meeting, stunned Mexican security honchos got the vibe he meant bombs and not hugs. Should I show you this? I've been perturbed by the support for Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan Tate by the US government and by the manosphere and by Alina Harbour and people just like supporting this guy and Donald Trump Jr. If you actually listen to, and he said it all in public, so you can go and find videos of what he said. If you don't come away absolutely freaking horrified by this human being and understand why he is under investigation, then you get, again, your head's not screwed on.
Listen. Did I say the word listen? Stupid bitch. I didn't say the word listen. Did I say listen? Did I say listen? Look at the camera. Did I say listen? Did I say it?
Anyway, I'm going to stop that there. I mean, full on hit her around the face and then did all that stuff, and that's what he advocates doing. And the stuff that he talks about and has done, I'm sorry if you found that offensive, but you please understand who he is. I get people defending him that haven't really looked into him, haven't properly seen the other side of the story, just go along with what he said. Just go and listen to the stuff he says and find out how disgusting he is. Now, if you are giving... So the point of showing this is that the US has actually forced Romania to release these people to the US so they don't face the legal consequences of their activities, sex trafficking, rape, etc., etc. If you are doing that and at the same time giving Zelensky hassle publicly in the White House for standing up for his nation that's been in battle for 3 years after having been invaded, and you have people coming onto national television who are Trump adjacent or former Trump, in this case, advisors, saying there's nothing morally wrong, it's not morally wrong for Russia to have invaded, then we've got a warped sense of reality going on in the White House. And it's deeply, deeply troubling that you can see that these people are better human beings than Zelensky. You're calling Zelensky a dictator. You're defaming him consistently, defaming the country, but welcoming Andrew Tate and his brother, who are disgusting human beings. Like, this is not right. It is simply not right. And you know, like, you know, I don't advocate for a Trump presidency anyway, but like, if you're so morally compromised as this, I can't believe that this is a guy that you would want as your president. I just can't believe it. He's a sexual felon himself, Donald Trump, and what I'm most annoyed about in terms of and this is Merrick Garland's fault, but the court cases that would have been successful against him, the biggest one, the absolute shoo-in, that because they couldn't get their asses in gear and left it too late and they had to be cancelled because they couldn't sort it out before Trump came into power, the documents case. The documents case was a shoo-in. He should have been absolutely done for this. And do you know what? Those documents have just gone back to Mar-a-Lago. So it sounds innocent and normal, says Shashank Joshi sarcastically. Nothing to see here. Quote, President Donald Trump on Friday transported back to Florida with him boxes of documents that the FBI had seized from Mar-a-Lago after executing a court-ordered search warrant in August 2022. Morality, legality, decency, it's all gone out the window. That's this administration. You may be someone that really supports Ukraine and is really unhappy with how Trump has treated Ukraine, but still be totally behind Trump. But I could give you a litany of stuff that Trump is doing that would suggest that it's just not morally decent for this. This Trump administration is not morally decent. They're not looking after the American people. They don't care for the average Joe. They don't care for people who aren't billionaires and millionaires. Read the signs. Thank you for watching. Take care. I know it's been a long one. Speak to you soon.